Let's talk with Calvin in California. I'm so excited for this call.
Me too. Calvin, you're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about today?
Hey, Eric, it's an absolute privilege to be talking to you. I can't believe I'm going to be the first caller, so I'm very thankful. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We got V on here, too.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, I haven't been a Christian all too long, but a decent amount of time now, a good some years. And I had some practice in some different spirituality before Christianity. And when I didn't know much about atheism, but once I came across it, there was I had this thing that I still kind of believe today, that maybe the level of skepticism that atheists have might be pushing away any work God could do. And the first thing when I met some atheists,
hold on.
Show me proof. And I quickly had issue with that because I don't have God in a bottle. And so,
Calvin,
the Bible says that...
Calvin, can you hear us?
Okay.
I kind of want to ask you, so you're saying that skepticism was a hindrance here. What is skepticism to you? How do you define skepticism?
Well, you're gonna say, or I kind of agree in the fact of, I would say skepticism is, believing something with sufficient evidence. But the problem that I see with atheists is they ask for evidence on man's point of view. And so when I look at certain like people that have had near-death experiences, had dreams or visions, going to hell, they come back and they have these. They have incredible stories. They have incredible testimonies, but they never have this. Like, I got this answer and I can give it to you, and then this answer that I'm going to give to you, you'll guarantee to believe it. And so,
Calvin, I've got a question for you. So you're saying that one of the issues is that skeptics and atheists tend to ask for human level evidence, as opposed to, I'm assuming, God level or spiritual level evidence. If God is in fact wanting to reach humans and understands, I'm assuming, that skeptics exist and would be convinced with the right kind of evidence, isn't it within God's power to give us human level evidence? Or is that unreasonable to ask? If that's what we need to believe and God wants us to believe, why not give us that?
Because I think he does. In Daniel, it talks about that he humbled himself before God, and then the heavens heard. And, there's a point where it says Jesus marveled at the disbelief of people. And so, at least from my point of view, I respect the atheist point of view. But how I became a Christian, how many other people became Christian, there's things that people come across and they say,
sure.
So
here's the problem, Calvin. Calvin, I'd like to jump in here. So here's the issue with that. So what's the difference between somebody hearing Jesus and somebody hearing voices in their head?
I guess there was one time that I believe I heard the voice, but there is, I think there's a desire that is already in us to find God,
so if you really want it, then it's the voice of God, but if you don't really want it, then it's just a voice in your head?
No, I didn't come to God because, I
didn't ask you how you came to God. I'm asking you what the difference is. So here's the thing, is you're giving us anecdotal evidence. You're saying here are people's personal experiences. Maybe they had some crazy story or dream or whatever. And while I understand that can be meaningful to you, I want to make sure that what you believe is for good reasons, because I've had lots of crazy dreams and I'm not changing the direction of my life because of them. I have to really be sure that what I dreamed must, correlate to reality before I make a big change like that. And I would want you to do the same. So when I ask you, what's the difference between somebody who has some kind of mental illness or is going through a breakdown, for some reason is hearing voices in their head and it's purely them, or hearing the voice of God? Because if somebody says they've heard the voice of God, you're going to want to listen, right? How do you tell the difference?
I believe I found God because I humbled myself. God, can you show me?
I didn't ask you that, Calvin. Calvin, I can ask you about you and God. But that wasn't the question.
I think that many people are I'm going to try to answer this the best I can. Okay, I think many people are trying to have a practice, and they're really trying to find God. And no one ever told me that God moved, and I know you're gonna probably ask me to back that up, but
no, I'm going to ask you what that has to do with the question.
I view my how I know God moved is I was able to reach out to God in some ways, somehow, however He decided He moved.
Calvin?
And so I think day by day, and God, if you can work in my life,
Calvin,
please do.
Dude, I didn't ask you about that. So this is the second time. If we do this a third time, then we're going to see that you're spinning in circles. We want to talk with you. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. So I asked you how people can tell the difference between hearing voices and hearing the voice of God. And instead, you started talking about how God moves, and that has absolutely nothing to do with what I asked. So I hope you understand. It feels on this end, like you're just waiting for your turn to talk at us, and that does not make for a good conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I don't want that.
Good. I don't either.
I just think it might be. I just think it might be a. I can't. I guess I'm just struggling to answer your question, honestly, to be quite honest with you.
Well, here's where we're framing it in this way, right? You call in and you say something about multiple people, right? Like you talk about, skepticism and skeptics have a hard time distinguishing between a lack of human evidence and maybe the presence of some divine or spiritual evidence. And so what we're asking is not about you, but about that larger group of people that you brought up, right? These skeptics who need some kind of evidence. And Eric is asking, okay, well, let's talk about this group. And let's say that some of them hear voices and interpret it as, oh, I need to go get my head checked because there might be something wrong. And other people interpret it as, oh, this is Jesus talking to me. Within that group, how do they know who's right?
I've never had that issue. I honestly can't answer that question. Can I try? And I hope can I try to put this back in your corner a little bit?
What's up?
So if we have, let me think about this real quick.
No worries.
Okay.
I know calling in can kind of stressful as well, and it can feel very rushed. And I remember the very first time I did an episode on Talk Heathen, my heart was pounding out of my chest. So it's cool. Take your time.
Yeah.
What's going on? We want to talk to you.
Awesome. So if people, they asked Christopher Hitchens this once. He didn't entirely get a answer, not because of his fault. I think it was just rapid question. But how can you, if we just evolved to have the system we have, and we don't have a free will, how are we not? How can you even tell that you're stable enough to do the chemicals if we're just biological?
Well,
how are we?
Those are amazing questions, Calvin. Those are great questions. Would answering any of those questions have anything to do with believing in a God?
Well, because you're asking me how I tell the difference, but in that perspective, the same question goes for, if I have no free will and it's just a chemical reaction happening at all times of life.
There are believers who do and don't believe in free will as well. So I don't know where the free will piece comes in, but specifically, earlier you said I'm having a hard time answering this, and that is totally, and it's totally understandable why you would have a hard time. I think it is an intellectually honest and very, very brave thing to do, because you have to be vulnerable to be able to admit, hey, this is something that I'm having trouble with. And I would love for you to take that back to wherever you want to. Take it back to a pastor, take it back to, and research it and look into it. How do you tell the difference?
Well, okay, I think it would be best if we talked in you and me terms. I don't think the group thing is working as well as maybe it would other times. Calvin, this is my question. And I think this ties back to what you were bringing up, right? You were tossing it back to me, tossing it back to us and saying, hey, how would you tell the difference, right? How would you determine that it was just something in your brain versus God, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what we would do, what a skeptical position would be, is to say, all right, this thing is happening to me. I am experiencing voices in my head. Let me look for proven things that cause this to happen and explore all of those options before jumping into an unexplained or spiritual element. So the reason that I would probably guess that I needed to eat something or get some sleep or go see a doctor is because I know for a fact, because we have studied and proven that this happens when those things are a problem, when those things happen. So that would be my first line of direction. It wouldn't go straight to God. Only after I had fully examined all options and got rid of all of them would I then even start to think about something else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, people with these, I got this question, and it might veer off a little, so I do apologize, but it's something I really want to hear from an atheist.
Okay, and then we do have a couple of other callers we want to get to, so
Gotcha.
Don't get me wrong, talking to you is fun, but yeah, go ahead. Last thing.
I'm enjoying this. Because of the abundance of testimony, you know, that there's almost nothing that I find that there's not a testimony out there for. Do you guys ever look at people's testimonies and people's experiences and really take into the count? You know, because I hear questions. It's like, how do you know it's not a different religion? Well, for me, that's very easy. You know, Jesus, you know, was able to not have a stone thrown when he said, you know, anyone accused me of doing wrong. Well, the person in Islam, Muhammad, is pretty dang immoral. And
Calvin.
the problem is,
we're kind of bouncing all over the place.
Yeah,
are we talking about testimony, or are we talking about scripture? Because those are two different things.
Definitely, I'd rather at least get the chance to answer the first one, because the second one sounds a little bit more like my dad could beat up your dad.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Calvin. You said there is not a thing I could name that there isn't testimony for. And that's why it's not good evidence for anything. Because if everyone had the exact same testimony, the exact same experience, then that would be something to investigate, because that's interesting. But no matter what you say, you can say aliens, you can say fairies, you can say any religion, Elvis, you can say anything, and there will be people who say, yes, I have experienced that. And so the problem with testimony is not that we don't have any, it's that we have too much, and it's too varied to make any one claim.
Exactly. And so we need to sort through it the best way that we can. So there's this idea, and I absolutely want to dispel it, that we are for some reason trying to push away the idea of a God. We're not. We're just looking at the evidence, and we're trying to understand it the best way that we can. And so far, there hasn't been any good evidence for God, because the kind of evidence that kind of anecdotal evidence, like Vi just said, points to aliens and, you know, Elvis and electoral arguments. It's just, it doesn't get us anywhere. We have to have more than that.
So what would you need to believe in God? Because if I have to, you know, people test out certain spiritualities, and then so they already put the position above God. The God needs to show them to me, and God says, I want a relationship with you. Come to me humbly. And then they assume that they can test the devil, like the devil's a weaker than them.
Calvin, and
the devil's real. He wants to keep you in your position.
No, Calvin, we're not getting into your fan fiction, and we're not getting into Christian fan fiction. I really don't care what people want to talk about in their fanfic. That's fine. That's up to them. But don't put it on me like I live in that universe. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, we can sit and we can argue the same thing about Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and any other fictional universe, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't get us anywhere. If you want to call back and tell us why we should care about the Bible more than any other book, I'd love to hear that. Mm-hmm. But today's just not that day.
Right. And if you were to do that and convince us that the Bible was somehow inerrant, that would go a long way to proving the God that you believe in. So the answer to your question, what would make us believe in God? Well, a good first step would be to prove that the Bible is true. So if you want to call back next week and talk about that, we certainly can.
Sure. Or a solid definition for God,
like
period.
When people have the when people have these near-death experiences, they have these Bible verses they've never seen before coming to them. So a lot of things they've never experiencing. Do you think that's still delusion?
Calvin, this is this is kind of a little like call back in, and we can talk about near-death experiences. We can talk about any of the other
biblical inerrancy. We can go multiple ways with this, and we want to. We just need to make sure we're getting other callers on as well. So give us a call back. We want to talk with you more.
Yeah, pick one, and we're going to try and stay in that lane so that we can flesh it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Take it easy, man.
Calvin. That was a pleasant call.
That was. Calvin. I like it. Yes.